Okay, I'm going to give a little short presentation about who I am. I guess my background or whatever. I'm 59 years old. I'm a cancer patient right now. This is my third uh, time around. I'm going to start chemo next Friday. Um, I have a port implanted. I underwent cancer therapy twice before my past. One extensive. Okay, well, let's see. I was born in 1962, and I was raised in Bothell, Washington, into a Jehovah's Witness family. I was adopted when I was 2 weeks old. Um, it was all planned before I was even born, my adoption. I have a little brother who's 5 years younger than me, who now resides at the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses in New York. I have an older sister who is about 3 years older than me, who resides in Louisiana. And my eldest sister resides in Oregon, and she's about 9 years older. No, she's 7 years older than me. Um, we're all pretty, we have disparate interests. My oldest sister was a gymnast and a gymnastics coach. Um, of the four of us siblings, only one of us became a Jehovah's Witness. Um, I'm an atheist now. And let's see. So I was a pretty inquisitive and energetic kid. I always had questions about why things were, and I was impressed by large numbers. And I bothered a lot of people by constantly asking them questions. I always had many questions in mind simultaneously that I needed to know the answer to. You note that I say that not that I wanted to know the answer to, that I needed to know the answer to, or that I felt I had the right to have this urge to need to know the answer to. So I was a little bit of a brat, annoying kid. On the other hand, I was really good natured and I liked everybody, and I got I was very well socialized. Everybody liked me, and I liked everybody. So um, my schooling was fairly normal. Kindergarten, first grade. Uh, I was just the most inquisitive kid around. In the second grade, I distinguished myself as being somewhat different than many other little kids in a sort of an odd way. Now, I still don't know the motive, but I had a teacher who I think got tired of me. And at any rate, she had me go see the hearing, speech and hearing counselor. And they did some tests on my ears and my eyesight and stuff like that. And they discovered that I couldn't hear a few high tones. And the teacher asked me, so I was constantly running around saying, thousand, thousand this, thousand that. And so the teacher asked me if I could say thousand. And I said, thousand. Can you say thousand? Thousand. And then she said, the speech counselor, not the teacher, she said, so why do you say thousand? And I said, that's because the way I was taught it was thousand. And that's because one of my questions that I had earlier was, what is the biggest number? And at that time, I didn't know that there wasn't a biggest number. I assumed that there was a biggest everything. And so my eldest sister told me thousand. And by the way, uh, I'm not at all upset about that because this is the best thing that happened to me in my life, probably. What happened directly after that. And besides, when I was a year and a half old, roughly speaking, she saved me from the ocean. I remember this. I first time I saw the ocean, I ran into it directly, and she saved me from drowning. So, so anyway, they sent me to a special school for the learning disabled because it was thought that I had a learning disability. So, um, I had to ride a special little yellow bus each morning, and I did so for 3.5 months before um, they ran out of stuff for me to do. Previous to this, with a teacher who got tired of me, perhaps, I don't know her motive, I had been in the lowest reading group one week, and then the middle reading group, like a couple days later, in the highest reading group, like by the end of the week. And perhaps that's a precursor to what would be going on later. Now, nobody taught me to read when I was young. Um, my parents, that is, I learned in school. I learned the alphabet through my parents and how to count through my parents, but I didn't learn how to read, I don't think. At least I have no recollection of it. I have a very good memory. So I can remember things from before I was 1 year old. Well, like one or two things. So it's something that I would remember if it happened. So let's just assume it didn't happen. So when I went to this school, the little yellow bus, we had a teacher named Mrs. Kelly, and we had a class of about 26 kids. And the kids were intermixed of all grades. And most of them were male. And this is pretty natural, right? Male kids act up more. And so the teachers want to get rid of them. And so the teachers find a way to label them as learning disabled. So the first 2 days I worked in a group of like 4 kids. It was a marvelous learning environment. And then after that, the teacher had me work in a group of 1. So I worked alone, and she would just bring me little workbooks. And I'd work on them for an hour or two. Then she'd look at them, and then she'd bring me another one. And at the end of the day, if we were all good, we get a cookie. And that was really a highly motivating factor. I wanted a cookie every day, and I got a cookie every day. Well, anyway, after about 3.5 months, there were no workbooks left. So the workbooks ranged from kindergarten through 6th, right? So I had worked through all the 6th grade level books, and I was in the 2nd grade. And I wanted to stay with Mrs. Kelly because I loved her so much, but she had to get rid of me. So I was given the choice. She wanted to advance me for me to skip grades. That wasn't something my parents liked, especially my mother, because I was born August 26th. And so I already had been placed where I was approximately 6 months to a year younger than all of my fellow classmates anyway. And she was especially afraid of me getting beaten up or something, which didn't happen very much. And besides, any fighting that was done, I don't remember being in a fight actually in elementary school until the 2nd or 3rd grade. I was like in one fight in elementary school. We had wrestling matches all the time. Those weren't fights. Anyway, so I was just placed in the same grade, and I went to the same school, but in a normal classroom. That choice is given to me. It was Anderson Elementary instead of Shelton View Elementary in Washington State, and I discovered that I was smart. And the only way that I discovered I was smart was because the teacher who was teaching thought that I was smart. So I was smart because the teacher thought that I was smart. So, and then when I went back to Shelton View the next year in the 3rd grade, as a 3rd grader, the same thing happened. All the teachers were told that I was smart, and so I just did whatever the hell I wanted. I already knew most of the stuff they were teaching, and got very easily bored, and I was very highly energized, inquisitive. I wanted to know how things worked and why things worked the way that they supposedly worked. And so I just did my own thing, and that continued for the rest of my life pretty much. So I didn't do homework. Being a Jehovah's Witness kid, we weren't required to do homework. Well, wait a minute. Our parents, anyway, my brother and sisters, my parents were able to get them to do homework somehow, but my parents were never able to get me to do homework. I really hated doing homework, and I did everything. I just refused to do it. So I didn't do homework, and that pretty much applied until I graduated from high school. And let's see. Um, so I went to Kenmore Junior High School after the sixth grade. By the way, before I went there, I read a whole lot of books. I read books like Harriet the Spy, Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn. I read, okay, so there's a whole bunch of novels, mainly sci-fi. I also read science books from the Bothell Library, things like Seesaws, The Cosmic Rays, Mr. Tompkins in Wonderland. I also read some Einstein's book of relativity. I read Bertrand Russell's book on relativity. I read Bertrand Russell's My Philosophical Introduction, or My Philosophical Development, all before I was in the sixth grade, or seventh grade, rather. Then I went to a new school, and Kenmore Junior High, and let's see, so everything was new, and I was too big for the kids to shove me, the ninth graders to shove me into the locker room, so I got spared into lockers. So I got spared that, but it's a tradition that the seventh graders who were small got shoved into lockers. I escaped that. I met some new friends. I started playing chess during lunch. Um, I took an algebra course by the PE, by the football coach. And that's the thing. I got in trouble right away because, I wasn't paying attention in elementary school. And they didn't teach us algebra in elementary school. So I learned algebra on my own through a book. I don't remember which book. I think it was Asimov's book, actually. Anyway, Asimov has a book on algebra and stuff like that. So, I and I learned things like the Pythagorean theorem through. I think it was Bertrand Russell's book on relativity. So I I thought that the word integer, which means whole number, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. There's negative integers too, so-called natural numbers, right? Integers. I thought it was pronounced integer, and of course, this is a uh, Arabic pronunciation, right? It's an Arabic symbol originally, so I had no idea. So I had an argument with my PE teacher, with the football coach, who was my algebra teacher, in class, and I was an ass, and I said that he was mispronouncing integer. It's integer, and this is day one of junior high school. So he got mad, and he pretty much kicked my ass. He didn't touch me physically. He just I had to leave the class like really early. Um, I think I got an argument within 20 minutes. All right, so um, after that, things went pretty swimmingly. I still didn't do homework, but I just um, learned on my own. Still, I learned a lot of stuff on my own. And then when I took an astronomy class in the ninth grade, and there was a student teacher there, and I knew more than the original astronomy teacher knew about astronomy. I got one question wrong during from one of her tests, which is what is the closest star? I said it was Alpha Proxima, which is thought to be 4.33 light years away at that time. But of course, the closest star is the sun. I kind of spaced that out. But she also asked, what is the nearest galaxy? Of course, there's a bunch of irregular galaxies, and as I said, I think it was a large Magellanic Cloud at 160,000 light years away. But she said no, it was the Andromeda Galaxy, which at that time was thought to be 2.2 million light years away. But I think within the last 50 years has been deemed to be a bit closer than that. So I think the actual distance these days is closer to 2 million light years instead of 2.2 million light years, probably due to looking at a more accurate evaluation of the intrinsic brightness of Cepheid variables. But at any rate, and probably due to the Hubble telescope. And at any rate, so the student teacher wanted me to go to college. She said, you just go to college. You don't need all this stuff. So, and there was some interaction with my parents, and that never happened. So I probably should have gone to college. And then I went to high school, and I went to Inglemoor High School. And, at that point in time, I was the best chess player in the state for my age. As even in junior high school, I was better than all the local high school board #1 chess players. That's a side effect of starting chess, in the 7th grade and playing during lunch. I got interested in chess, so I learned how to play by playing against myself and reading every book that I could find. And so I got to be pretty good chess player. Now, these days they have training for chess. They teach kids how to play chess. I just learned on my own. Anyway, so I was board #1 in chess at Inglemoor High School for 3 years, and I got along with everybody, and everything was cool. I was a bit of a chameleon, and I think I still am, in that, except for now, I don't care. But when I cared about what people thought of me, I could fit in anywhere as almost anything. So if I felt like I should, or these days I don't really care. So I graduated from high school. I graduated from junior high school with a 1.67 GPA. And I graduated from high school with a 2.07 GPA. And the reason for this is because I never did homework. And back in the day, they used to, about 80% of your grade was homework, roughly speaking. 20% of it was like tests. That's kind of a ridiculous method of evaluating competency as far as I'm concerned. And that's what tests should do. Evaluate whether somebody has learned something or is competent. But I didn't need to do homework to become competent. And I felt like everything was overly repetitive. They teach the same stuff over and over and over again each year. And I didn't pay attention in some classes like political science and history. I was always like reading my own book or something. Anyway, so then I didn't take a PSAT. I didn't know about it. I was probably the side effect of being in a Jehovah's Witness family and not being connected with what is important. I took the SAT a bit late to go to Bellevue Community College, and I think I scored like a 740 or 50. But anyway, I went to Bellevue Community College, and I got straight 4 points for that was 1980, 1981. At first, the first quarter was kind of tough, I think. At least I worked hard. I didn't know that I didn't have to work hard. And maybe it's the fact that I actually needed to work hard because it was a different experience. I had to learn how to learn in this social setting in which very particular things were required of me. So I did all my homework and I did it all on time, and I got a 4 point. And the next quarter I got a 4 point. It was easier. The next quarter I got a 4 point. It was easier. The next quarter I got a 4 point. I was starting to get bored. The next quarter I got a 4 point. I was really bored. And I was also really cocky. I'd somehow become like really arrogant. Because I was surrounded by thousands of students, and they all thought I was like really super smart. And I was doing that's right. There were there were professors who would give me. They had their own little weekly contest where they do hard math problems, and I'd win that sometimes as a freshman. So I was like one of the only two or three students that were allowed to participate in this. So and then so anyway, so I decided to take everything independent study. I signed up for 20 credits, and I decided not to study until about 10 days before the last final. And I studied really hard, and I didn't get a 4 point because I didn't actually have time to cover everything thoroughly. So I graduated with a 3.96 overall, and then I went to the University of Washington. Then at the University of Washington, um, let's see, I took a summer course immediately in physics, and I don't remember what it was. It was like it was mechanics. Celestial mechanics is not physics. It was just mechanics. So it's like, you know, um, I think was it mechanics? Yeah, it was mechanics. We used a red book, right? So it uses that was interesting. But the thing is, I was starting to drink, and I skipped classes. It was the summer, and I took a test and I got a 77 on it. And at the university, I mean at Bellevue Community College, I was always getting like freaking 97%, and then I got a 77% on a test in physics. And my professor was Professor Peters, who was a student of Richard Feynman's from Caltech. And I went to him and I argued for a half hour. And he was amused. He liked me. He wouldn't let most kids do that. So that was a good experience. But I didn't know that he was kind of pulling my leg. And he gave me no extra points. And he knew I missed the class where they gave the overall curve results. And he said, "Mr. Zick, do you know what score? Do you know what grade this is?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Mr. Zick, this is an A plus." So I said, "Oh, okay, never mind." And anyway, I got the third highest score in the class, and all of the highest score in the class is something like 82. And so anyway, I didn't like getting. I was used to getting always the highest score in the class, and I didn't apply myself very well. I didn't like that experience. Um, yeah. Anyway, so I go to school, and I for about a year everything's going pretty well. I got really depressed, and I dropped out for about a year and a half. Um, and depression is something that has accompanied my lifetime experiences, um, sort of as a accompanying factor. I don't know. It just clung to me on and off for almost my entire life. So then, and the periods of time where you're really depressed, the detail, the memory of what the hell happened, you tend to not remember it as sharply as the other times, and that has to do with your brain is functioning, right? I mean, so anyway, I could go into how your hippocampus, like you know, it, um, is important for the manifestation of of the concretization of memories through sleep, and about how certain brain chemicals are important to maintain the healthy functioning hippocampus, and how and this is like something I read 20 or 30 years ago, and how your hippocampus actually shrinks when you're depressed. So anyway, so when I was depressed, I worked for AT&T, and I drank a lot. I worked for AT&T Telnet Center, and I did telephone interviews for 3 years. Yeah, I mean, when I went back to school, I was still working at AT&T, but it was a really boring job. And then I also worked at the UW Instructional Center, as a part-time tutor in physics and math and engineering. And then I went to graduate school in math, and then my best friend died. He jumped off a pier. He was only 28, Thornton Guerrero. And I got really depressed and I dropped out. And I continued working at the instructional center. And then I went to graduate school in physics. Oh, wait a minute. No. My dad died when I was a graduate student in math. And when I was a graduate student in physics, Thornton died. He was 28. Yeah. So I must have been like, yeah, he was 28. He's 4 years older than me. So I must have been like 24. Anyway, that doesn't seem to add up time-wise, but I don't know. So for the most part of my life, I worked as a tutor at the instructional center at the University of Washington. By the way, by then I was the Washington State Junior Chess Champion, and I was the UW Chess Champion 3 times, and I was the UW Backgammon Champion 3 times, and yeah. So I hung out at a place called The Last Exit, and because there were a lot of really smart kids hanging out there, people in general. And I met the dishwasher, Don Itzel, there, who worked on the Manhattan Project. He was a physicist who dropped out. And I met Mark Lawrence there, who claims to have an IQ of 185 or something. And he and I were very competitive all the time. And he ended up like not liking me and stopped talking to me for some reason. I don't know, but he was always competing with me, and I felt like I was in competition with everybody, not him especially. But for him, he felt that he was in competition, especially with me, I guess. And one of the things he wanted me to do is learn Go and to compete with him in Go, because he became a good Go player very quickly. But the thing is that at that point in time, I realized that Go would be a complete waste of time for me, that I would get addicted, and that it would be like a black hole that I didn't want to sink into. There was a guy named Dave, speaking of sinking into black holes, there was a physicist named Dave Wick who wrote about interpretations of quantum mechanics. And he felt like he should have been able to understand quantum mechanics intuitively. And he wasn't able to, just like nobody's able to. And there's a perfectly rational explanation for why people why the necessity of people being able to understand quantum mechanics is not something that one would just expect on an evolutionary basis. It's because we evolved to deal with macroscopic effects in our environment, which are central to survival. And it's simply the case that things the size of electrons and atoms, what electrons and atoms are doing, had no individual entities, not as coherent globs, which behave like something larger than themselves. had no effect on our survival whatsoever. Therefore, it makes no sense that we should be able to visualize these things. What we're visualizing is the way macroscopic materials behave, right? Things, which are so large that the difference between a Newtonian description of them and a quantum mechanical description of them is almost indistinguishable. So we therefore develop no intuition for quantum mechanical uh, sized objects, which, by the way, can be very microscopic as well, but only if there's special, if the initial conditions, the conditions are, if they're specially arranged, right? Now, that doesn't have to be arranged by us. It could be arranged by the emergent nature of complexification, right? Uh, Entropy doesn't always increase. The entropy of the universe increases, but the entropy of local systems um, can decrease, especially if energy is injected in them. And the sun is constantly injecting energy into our Earth. And there's, anyway. So, so I worked at the instructional center, and I hung out at the last exit, and and I still thought that I might die because I never really got over the Jehovah's Witness teachings, even though I didn't believe them. Um, I didn't disbelieve them as well. They were programmed into me. And there's sort of like, I didn't realize it at the time, but that's sort of it's natural for a human being to have, to believe contradictory things simultaneously without necessarily realizing it, and to perhaps have several modes of expression whereby these contradictory things can emerge. And it's a sort of a weighing of the different contradictory things that brings semblance to reasonableness of our actions and opinions. And there's something called the tetralemma or the Cattoscoti, which is a system of logic which expresses the human nature of our wet neural nets that are going on in our human body, right? Our mind. Our mind consists of many independent neural networks which only communicate at certain levels. They communicate, generally speaking, at 6 levels. I mean, I can't say that for sure, but many of the systems of our brain communicate at 6 different levels. Like, for example, the verbal system, like you got Broca and Wernicke and 4 other levels. Facial recognition, there's 6 levels there, right? The occipital lobe has many, many, many stages. But at any rate, we have a left brain and we have a right brain. And there's something called the corpus callosum, which separates the two. And when people have seizure disorders so bad, sometimes they need to have it severed. And there are certain accidents, sometimes people need to have their corpus callosum severed. And what that happens is called a callosotomy. There's a philosopher named Sperry who studied these people at Caltech in the 1960s. And he noticed that generally speaking, the right half, this is everything's backwards. This is the right half side of my brain. It controls the left side of my body and vice versa. That's a general principle, and it applies to the eyes as well, though it's certainly much more complex. Everything goes through the optic chiasma and gets reversed. Well, first it gets reversed through the retina, then it gets reversed through optic chiasma, then it gets reversed again in the occipital lobe. But it was discovered by Sperry that a person with a callosotomy could want to put on his the right side of his brain wants to put on his shoes, and the left side of his brain might want to take them off. And because the huge fibrous bundle, which communicates the highway forms a highway communication between the left and the right brain, was cut off. Now that's not the only way that the two brain halves communicate, but it's by far the most major way that a person behaves like two people. So you have two major interconnected wet neural network systems that aren't coming up with some sort of an agreement as to what the entity as a whole wants to do. Okay, so that's an expression that goes on with all of us, but we all have a resolving entity. All of us with corpus callosum have a resolving entity in order to make the final decision and to come up with one experience of the whole world, of the entire world. Okay. But speaking of the Catascotti and the tetralemma, these are, you've heard of Aristotelian logic. Well, these are systems of logic which predate Aristotle by at least 100 years. And in that system of logic, it's possible to believe and to not believe simultaneously. So the system of logic is you have A, and then you have not A. And then you have not A or not A. Now it's you can have A and not A right away. A and not A. So simultaneously held belief and disbelief as a valid logical entity, as long as you later have not A or not A. Not A or not A. Anyway, so anyway, my feeling is of both believing that the world was going to end soon, that I would die soon because I didn't I did not become a Jehovah's Witness, and the feeling that this was not true at the same time was present with me for decades of time. During my life, I picked up Scrabble. Yeah, somebody, I became a tournament Scrabble player. I know, I became my first I became an expert within 3 tournaments, and in that 3rd tournament, I beat Dave Wiegand, who was the U.S. champion, 2-0. Meaning I won 2 and lost 0 games against him. Oh, I was extremely lucky. But anyway, in general, if I got interested in something, I applied myself and I learned it. I did pretty well. And later in life, I played backgammon at the last exit, and I read every book out there that I could get my hands on, which is almost every book. And I became really good, and I quit for 20 years. And then I heard about a tournament that was being held in Denver. It was in Denver. I was in Seattle. So I quit for 21 years, except for when I had cancer. I played against a neural net bot called GNU. I played for like 3 years, and the bot would evaluate my play, and the neural net bots were better than any human. And the neural net bot said I was world class. So when I played in Denver, I figured that I'd probably be better than everybody. And so I adopted a sort of a different way of playing tournaments by assuming that everybody was worse than me. And the truth of the matter is, I just didn't know who the best players in the country were. And a lot of them were there. Many of them were there. And I just didn't know it. But there were three divisions, the lowest, the middle, and the highest. And I entered the highest because it had the longest rounds, longest number of games per round. And so skill would matter the most. And so I figured that I had a better chance of winning the highest division than perhaps the intermediate division because the rounds were longer. And I figured I was better than everybody anyway. So I won that. I went 5-0. And I played a few other tournaments, but before that, I played in Vegas. I had a really good period where I was winning a lot of tournaments, but I didn't win the Vegas tournament. Most of the tournaments were not major tournaments, like ABA tournaments. But I became number one in the world by ELO, which is a rating system, mainly because I hadn't had the negative drag of having started as a beginning player, an intermediate player, which drags your rating down. So I started with a high rating, and then it went up even more. And so for a period of time, about 6 months, I was the best player in the world by ELO. In reality, I don't think I ever really was the best player in the world. There's a Japanese player in the world who I think is better than me. And there's a few other people who are probably slightly better than me, but to be honest, I can't say that I think that there are more than one or two or three people who are clearly better than me, and more than 20 people are even slightly better than me. That's how I evaluate myself, as being somewhere around the top 20 in the world, or top 10 to 20, perhaps. Even though I'm not a professional like most of them are, and I don't play very much. But at any rate, I now let's see. All right, I think that's going to be it. So this will be just part one. My life part one. Right.